Hi there, and welcome back to another episode at Station Road. Now today I'm going to actually look at how I can model some farm hedges or hedgerows that you might see in a rural setting that might be a little bit untamed and a little bit sort of wild and bushy in appearance. So most of you will be aware that recently I've been working on remodeling the hillside, which of course incorporates a small section of a farm. And one of the aspects that I really wanted to sort of nut out, figure out how I was going to do it, was how to model some farm hedges. So not the beautifully manicured hedges that you might see in somebody's garden, but more the hedges that you might find around a rural setting that might be a little bit overgrown and a little bit wild in their appearance. So I put my thinking cap on to sort of think how I could work up some hedges that aren't too complicated, reasonably easy to make, and also hopefully reasonably cost effective. So if we take a look at some examples of the types of hedges that I'm trying to actually achieve or mimic to a certain degree, and of course there's quite a variety, and also you've got to factor in, I guess, the seasons of the year, whether it be winter or summer. So there's a number of different foliage types, and as I mentioned, the aim is trying to achieve quite a rustic, overgrown effect, and these are the types of hedges that might border along farm tracks or even border between paddocks in a rural setting. So with the particular types of hedges that I wanted to model for this particular area of the layout, let's just get into what I came up with. So we'll go through the process of how I actually made these rustic farm type border hedges, which could either be of course the Brambury or possibly gorse. So a couple of things that you actually need is a pair of scissors, a wire brush, a vise or anything similar for clamping. You'll need a hot glue gun, and of course I've just got some wax-proof paper here for creating these so that they don't stick to the surface that I'm making them on. So the main material that I'm actually using comes from these. So you find them with suspended plant baskets or wall-mounted baskets, and essentially it's a coconut fibre that's compressed into a matted type material, and there's a number of different sort of varieties that I actually found. So this one here, and I've already cut a chunk out of it here, but this came from a local hardware store. It was $12, so it's pretty cheap. And then I've got another version from a different hardware store, and it seems to be a lot looser and less compact than this, and I actually found that this particular one had a piece of plastic in the base of it as well. I don't know whether, I don't think that's got plastic in it, so I actually pulled that out, and what I've actually found is it appears that these are constructed like a double layer. So I've actually pulled that apart, and it's got a double thickness to it that's been applied when these were constructed. So I've cut a section out of the coconut fibre basket material, and we'll just cut this into some strips. Now it can be separated out if you wanted to, say, have a slightly more airy bush that wasn't so dense. So we'll try both, but firstly I'll just do a double layer, and I'm cutting a strip that's considerably more than what is actually needed for the hedge, so that we can actually clamp this into the vise and have a reasonable amount poking out, because of course with the scissors we can trim it back afterwards. So we're going to clamp that in there quite securely, and then with the wire brush we'll start teasing the coconut fibre. That was quite a large stalky bit in here which I'm going to cut out, and then we can sort of start to tease it up, trim off very long lengths, and you can just keep teasing it until you're sort of happy with how sort of, I guess, wild and unkept you want this hedge to maybe look. And I'm going for quite a rustic look, being a farm border which is either blackberry or gorse, that's acting as a border but has really had very little maintenance. So once you've got it out of the vise, then of course you've got this kind of form taking shape, and we've got our very wild looking twiggy stuff. This in itself could actually work if you were planning on maybe a border that was basically dead or dried out, so that could work in a scenario like that. Right, so I've got my grease-proof wax paper here, and I've just got this wrapped around the underside of an oven tray, and what we need to do now is carefully trim off most of the squashed excess part of the coconut fibre. So we're just going to run the scissors through here, being reasonably careful not for it to completely fall apart, but it's usually pretty good. It's sort of, the fibres actually stick together quite well. So you end up with sort of it cut quite close to the base. So now that we've got that, then it's a case of heating up our glue gun, and of course you can probably tell what I'm going to do, and we're going to run a strip of hot glue along here, and then essentially press this into the strip of hot glue. So while the hot glue gun is heating up, I'm actually just going to try some of this other material. So it has separated out into a thinner layer. So we're just going to cut a big chunk out of here. Now this one here is quite a bit different, I think, in some respects. It seems to have a lot more sort of long fibre in it, so I'm not entirely sure how well this one will actually work. Yeah, so you can see the result there is quite different on this one here. It's got a slightly more airy quality to it as opposed to the other one. So we'll prepare this as well for some hot glue. Once this is set in the hot glue and dried, then of course you can once again go through and trim any straggly bits or shape it to a more preferred shape. Right, so we've got our two strips of coconut fibre. So we'll stick the first one in. Now I'm actually using just a pair of tweezers to push this down onto the hot glue because I don't really want to burn my fingers. Oh, you wouldn't read about it, would you? Freaking gun runs out of glue. Right, so we'll just let that glue cool down and harden. I'm not entirely sure how well this one's actually going to work. It's probably a little bit too open weave for it to really sort of anchor in. I mean, it might still actually kind of work for maybe a more spread out ground cover type overgrowth, potentially sort of more like brambles that kind of spread out rather than maintain themselves in a row, like possibly like gorse. So we're just going to let those dry. So while that's drying, what I'm going to be using in terms of the scatter materials is some of these knock products. So one is just sort of a dark green scatter, and the other is a sort of an earthy coloured scatter. And what I've done is made up a blend of the two, so it's kind of got that texture to it with some highlights in it of potential dead foliage as well. So I'm just using a matte clear spray, so that will be used to actually apply the scatter. I'll spray a bit first and then apply the scatter. Then what I'm actually going to do as well is, before I do the scatter, is actually spray these with a matte brown spray paint. Now this is just a cheapy spray paint from the local hardware store, and the reason for that is I kind of feel like these would actually be a sort of a more darker sort of twiggy brown, and it would also help in terms of the glue underneath, which of course, you know, you've got this big blobby bit of glue, so if that's kind of disguised also with the matte brown, then when it comes to applying scenic material around this, you're not going to see this sort of blob of hot glue there at the bottom. So the first thing I'll do is I'll take these over to another area and give them a blast with this brown, and then we'll come back and apply some of these scatters. So I've now given these a quick blast with some matte brown, and I've gone over it with a very light dusting, so it's not completely caked in brown spray paint, and of course it's obscured the hot glue base a little bit, and of course once the terrain around this is actually built up, that will be hidden even further. So that's the other one there, which is definitely a lot more eerie. So we're now going to apply some scatter, and that will be the job done. So we'll start with this one here, and I'm just going to go over it with a reasonably close blast. You could probably use base spray that you use for static grass, or possibly even a really strong hairspray would also do the job, but I find this is quite good, and being a matte spray, it doesn't keep its glossiness. So we're just going to sprinkle some of the scatter across the top, and of course the more you apply, the more it's going to look like it's in lush growth, and the less you apply, the more it might look like it was dead or dying So I just get a little bit on the underside as well. And then one more blast of the spray. We can set that one aside. And do the other one. And that's our rambling hedge. So I think it certainly looks the part. And of course, if you wanted this to be gorse, then of course it would just need a thin sprinkling of maybe some yellow flowers, and you would end up with your gorse bush. So I definitely think it's come out quite well and will look the part on the layout, and it, of course, particularly around the farm scene. So there we have it. I think I've found a reasonably effective way of creating these rambling hedges, and I've just placed temporarily a section of this hedge into one of the areas that I've already applied some other scenic material, so you can sort of get an idea of how it's actually going to look. So as I continue progress on the hillside and really start working into the farm scene, then I'll be able to reproduce more of these rambling hedges and put them into places, particularly around where the farm access road comes in, and of course other areas as well around the hillside. So for my regular viewers, you're probably wondering, there seems to be quite a bit of a gap between videos currently at the moment, and there is really. I have got so much other stuff going on and lots of other planning for various domesticated duties, and also of course my work as well. So there has been quite a few gaps between the videos, and I haven't actually really made any further progress on the hill. The only thing I have actually done is given everything a coat of a base brown paint, and I guess that certainly helps to be able to sort of visualize the hill in more in its entirety, and how it's actually going to sort of pan out once scenic material is added. So also on the list, of course, is getting back to that coal merchant's yard and adding some detail into the boiler repairs workshop. And I've got all the detail items as I actually showed in the previous video. I just haven't had a chance to get on with that yet. So I'll leave it there for today's video. I certainly hope you've gathered some inspiration and ideas for creating some hedges on your layout. So do take care, everyone. Look after yourselves. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will catch you next time. Bye for now.